So, welcome everyone. My name's Damien, and I am leading this month's Monday nights. And so, thanks for all coming out tonight. And so, part of my topic this month has been this idea of Dharma, the Sanskrit word Dharma, which generally we take to mean the collection of the teachings of the Buddha. So we can say that the Dharma, the external Dharma, like these books here on each end of the altar, the teachings of the Buddha, and then, but for us, our own understanding and our own practice becomes an internal Dharma. So the basic idea of Buddhism is that I want happiness, I don't want suffering, and the way to achieve happiness and the way to be free of suffering let's say the essence of that is understanding cause and effect. That the essence of really understanding my happiness, my wish for happiness, and my actual happiness, what causes my happiness, and then my suffering, my mental suffering and my physical suffering, to really try to understand what causes that suffering. And so we can sort of reduce the whole of the Dharma, 50 years or 60 years of the Buddha's teaching, down to the explanation of what causes happiness and what causes suffering. And so for us, that the wish for happiness and the wish to be free of suffering is so innately possessed by us. And I think we can, if we examine our life, we can quite readily say that every action in my life is motivated from a wish to be happy and a wish to be free from suffering. And so the internal Dharma that we might be seeking is to have an understanding of what causes my happiness and an understanding of what causes my suffering. And so the Buddha's teaching about cause and effect is really key. So the essence of that is to say that the practice of virtue, let's say virtue is primarily non-harming. The practice of non-harming, the Buddha said, will lead to actions if I practice non-harmfulness, that will lead to actions, and the consequence of those actions will be happiness for myself. And similarly, the practice of harming others will lead to action. There'll be an action. A mind wanting to harm others will lead to an action, and that action will lead to future suffering for myself. So our ability to actually see the truth of that is really difficult. To actually fully embrace the truth of cause and effect is, it's a huge leap of trust and understanding. So we have no problem with cause and effect in general, in that if I want to go to the kitchen, I know I have to take one step, then another step, then open the door and follow that path and go this way, then that way. So cause and effect is absolutely essential to the simplest tasks in our life. If I want to put my trousers on, I have to, first of all, take off the trousers I've already got on, let's say. That's do one thing. Then unbutton these trousers, put one leg in one side and make sure that's the right size. So the cause and effect is absolutely necessary. And then put my other leg into the other side and make sure the trousers aren't back to front. So there's another cause and effect working there. And then to do up the fly and do up the button, do up the belt. There's a sequence of actions which is absolutely cause and effect in a very particular sequence. And if you start to examine every action, the mere sitting down on this cushion involves a sequence of physical actions. And if I get the sequence wrong, I won't end up sitting down here. I'll end up lying on the floor over there, or I'll be still standing up and thinking, why aren't I sitting? Because I haven't followed the correct sequence of cause and effect. So to really start to see that cause and effect is absolutely fundamental to all of our belief structure in the way life works. That from the simplest activity. But then when it comes to happiness, we think, no, it doesn't apply there. I can do whatever I like, but I still want to be happy. You sort of reinforce and say, I absolutely have the right to be happy. Why am I not happy? And it's certainly not due to my behaviour. So we have this pervasion of cause and effect in every aspect of our life. But when it comes to my basic experience of happiness and suffering, we somehow think that we are exempt from following a real cause and effect. We don't accept, the way not just Buddhism but most of the world's religions say this is the cause of happiness and this is the cause of suffering. And we tend to say, no, that's not right. I can do whatever I like, and I have the right to be happy and the right to be free from suffering. Right? So we do have the right to be happy, and we have the right to be free from suffering. But happiness and the absence of suffering is not automatic. Just because we wish it to be the case, just because we wish to be happy, and just because we wish to be free of suffering, does not make it happen. And we have to get over that idea that, I've spent my whole life wishing for happiness and I've got no happiness. Like the universe is not against you. That is just merely not properly following cause and effect. So, and I think to a large degree, and the Buddha tried to make it simple for us. The Buddha said, here's page number 1. This is all you need, is this. Avoid these 10 non-virtues and engage in these 10 virtues. And oddly enough, similarly, Christianity, Judaism, Islam have a very, very similar 10 rules, which is odd. Why 10? Why are they're relatively relatively similar, between the Buddhist ones and the Christian ones. There's a couple you think, it's not saying exactly the same, but it's in a similar vein. So whoever created all these other religions and the Buddha creating Buddhism, for whatever reason, they came up with a similar instruction. So the possibility is that it's like a fundamental truth about cause and effect. That the behaviour of the 10 virtues, or the absence of the 10 non-virtues, is fundamentally a beginning point for understanding cause and effect. So, we can try to get a feeling. We can try to get a feeling for that, and the way that Buddhism would explain the way to get a feeling for that is by saying that negativity, this topic, negativity, and we might think, okay, so the Buddha took all of these things and put them into the negativity box. And then he took these things like loving kindness, compassion, affectionate, thinking, love, patience, and put them all into the virtuous box. So we might, is that just a designation? Is it just a designation of different mental states being put into one box or being put into a different box? Or is there some truth that we can find in those categorizations? So that's something to check. If somebody says love and compassion is a virtuous state of mind, how can we check whether love and compassion in my mind is a beneficial thing or not? How can I check if anger is a harmful thing in my mind or not? How can I check if arrogance and excessive pride or miserliness, is it possible for me to check if, let's say, miserly behaviour is naturally beneficial or naturally harmful? So in the end, that's a truth or an apprehension that you have to find yourself. Because no matter whether it's the Buddha or Jesus or Abraham or Muhammad or, Nietzsche or whoever, whatever philosophy you might follow or don't follow or whatever, in the end, we have to be able to determine for ourselves whether anger is beneficial or harmful to me. Is arrogant pride beneficial or harmful to me? Is miserliness beneficial or harmful to me? And so I think the practice of Buddhism is really of Dharma, like this idea about an internal Dharma. For me to try to find an internal Dharma, the real essence of me finding an internal Dharma is having convinced myself that anger is not worthy of my mind. Like to really understand within myself that anger is a poison, whether in a small dose or in a huge dose, it is a poison for me. Right? To really have that absolute confidence. To have the absolute confidence that indifference to others is a poison. To have the absolute internal confidence that hatred, that, like we're saying, miserliness, that, superiority pride, competitiveness, to really try to understand that all of these things are poisons in my mind. And the reason they're poisons is because I've developed some faith that the consequence of actions brought about through anger, jealousy, pride, attachment, lustful attachment, that the consequences of those is destructive of my happiness. And then also to fully understand that the consequences of loving kindness, of patience, of love, of compassion, human, affectionate warmth towards others, that the consequence of those in my mind is naturally beneficial. So this sort of idea of what is Dharma, I think what is Dharma is having that internal confidence that it's beneficial to me to completely rid myself of anger, to really accept that state of complete confidence that no matter what I think, and no matter my sense of righteousness or my sense of injustice or my sense of superiority to someone and seeing the opportunity to be really angry at them, thinking that there's no consequence of humiliating somebody lesser than yourself, to really pick on somebody who's weak and defenseless, and thinking that there's no consequence in that because they can't fight back or they won't. I've got all the power, the indulgence in powerful superiority, and then picking on somebody because you think there's no consequence in abusing them or humiliating them or deceiving them or whatever it is. We think there's no consequence. And so the real understanding of Dharma is recognizing cause and effect in all of its aspects. And we can do that on a totally sort of personal level. You don't have to tell anybody what you're doing. You don't have to say a word to anybody about what you're trying to do in your mind. But to really be rigorous in your mind with understanding this aspect of cause and effect. And so this is, part of, what I've been talking about in terms of complacency. To try to overcome a complacency of, let's say, like getting angry at somebody who you see as lesser than yourself, and you're thinking, there's no consequences with me picking on this person or abusing them or, racing around a corner and blasting your horn at a pedestrian because you're in a car and they're just on their foot and you've got all the power. And so that little bit of sense of arrogance and superiority that you have because of your power, and then causing somebody to take a loss, to not cross on the green light, or to not give them the space, or to zoom past with some sort of intimidation. These are all aspects of that superiority mind. So, and the only way we can change that behaviour is to completely to understand this cause and effect. This causes that. This is caused by that. So to really understand what is this? What is the result of me getting angry? To really think, what is the result of me being angry? What is the result of me being generous? What is the result of me being miserly? So Dharma, the Dharma, and there's I started off this month talking about a comment that Geshe Doga had made, saying that nearly, and this was directed at the study group, all the long-term students, the highly educated long-term students, and the saying, you have to face the fact that nearly everything that you do in your life is not Dharma, And the sort of the deciding principle is that Dharma is focused on long-term benefit. And in the Buddhist context, that primarily means, at the very least, your next life. So to focus on stuff that is beyond this life, the affairs or the mere concerns of this life, is a limitation on our thinking. But to somehow to motivate ourselves to try to direct our actions for the benefit of a future life that we cannot see. So this is something maybe to take on faith or to examine, but we're sort of the idea of facing beyond this life, and that means initially just to obtain. If you like this life, do you like this life? Like this is one thing Geshe Doga says. Do you like this life, this body, these conditions? This human mind, this human heart, human experience, do you like it? Is that a yes? Is that a yes? Do you like this life? Look around. What are the alternatives? So from a Buddhist point of view, there's 8 billion humans. 8 billion humans, and as humans go, we have a very good life, right? Absolutely, we have a very, very good life. And to understand that, then start looking at the animals. Think, what sort of life have the animals got? And I'm not talking about your little doggy that gets pampered and, gets its nails clipped at the boutique or whatever, but animals in general. And the vast bulk of animals live in the sea, and their constant experience is some other animal in the sea trying to eat them. Constant. So the fish, the Buddhist view of fish is that they live in constant fear of being eaten. And then the insects, celebrating a life that is one day long, with a tiny experience, Again, compared to us, our life is so much better, and it's not trivial to think this. It's probably worthwhile to think that. So if you start to think that every, whatever this my human life, so I can say that certain DNA came from my mother, and certain DNA and things came from my father, and then the union of those two, I can trace every cell in my body back to that union. But my consciousness is not my mother's, and it's not my father's, and it's not a mixture of the two. Like to really see that I've got the same body as my father, 10 generations of blacksmiths gave some sort of body that I inherited from my father. And I have aspects of my mother, physical aspects. But I am pretty sure that my thinking is neither my mother's nor my father's, nor a mixture of the two. So, and Buddhism says, well, your consciousness came from somewhere else other than the egg and the sperm. It came from something else, a prior moment of consciousness. And so from some previous life that passed away, that consciousness, for whatever reasons, joined the union of the egg and the sperm, and so I have this, at the moment I have this association of my consciousness and this body. But it's rapidly heading to a point where this consciousness and this body are going to separate. Come back in, let's say, 50 years' time, there won't be a Damien. 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, 1 year, who knows? That separation will occur. And the consciousness, that some subtle aspect of the consciousness will head off somewhere. And then in dependence on cause and effect, it will again, sort of through the force of nature, again associate with some physicality. And hopefully it's not a fish, and it's not a mosquito, and it's not a snake, and it's not any one of other many possibilities. So cause and effect, so initially we can sort of start, just look at the mental experience and really convince ourselves about cause and effect. But real sort of like the cause and effect in this regard about what sort of birth you take is to some degree a more important topic. And so part of recognising the reality of the life that you have right now is to really appreciate the extraordinary rareness of this life. Really appreciate that. And then to think, what's the best way to take advantage of this life? Do I squander it on Netflix and poker machines, or, do I squander it on smoking and drinking and gambling? Do I squander it on womanizing and gossiping? To really think about the value of this life. And again, this is cause and effect, and really trying to take, however I manage to, or all of us, however we are managed to have this life, how did I manage to have this life? Because it's not something that I have done. This was handed to me on a plate. This life was handed to me on a plate by my parents. We can say that. But principally because of the connection of this consciousness with this body. And I cannot see the cause of that. It's not, for us, it's impossible for us to actually see the cause of that. So we can try to understand it a bit through what the Buddha said, and so we can have that, some sort of presumption of understanding how that happened. And then the issue for us is to think, all right, if I like this life, how can I have this life again? This is what Geshe Doga said in many teachings. He said, do you like this life? Do you like this life, this human life? Do you want it again? You think, oh yeah, I'll have it again. You put your hand up. But that's not the cause. Putting your hand up and saying, yeah, I want it again is not the cause. And so for us to try to understand what the cause is. And the Buddha said, what you can do is practice the 10 virtues, avoid the 10 non-virtues. So there's a famous story, a teacher who was one of the great Indian scholars, yogis, who was maybe the second or third wave of teachers going to Tibet. When he went to Tibet, he met his translator, a person called Drom Tompa. Anyway, there's a story about Drom Tompa watching this student And the student was, I think initially, I know I've got the details of this wrong, but the gist of it is correct. So the student was doing a whole lot of prostrations, like where people do the prostrations, which most of you have seen. So doing maybe thousands of them, or hundreds of them, thousands of them. And Atisha said to him, prostrations are fine, but why don't you do some Dharma practice? And so the monk was confused. So, well, I thought this was Dharma practice. And so then he thought, okay, well, I'll circumambulate this holy object, this stupa. So he was doing the circumambulations and saying prayers and all that. And then again, Dromtonpa said to him, circumambulation is fine, but why don't you do some Dharma practice? And so then he thought, well, maybe that means that I should do some offerings. So he then started arranging lots of offerings, water bowls and flowers and food and everything. And again, Dromtonpa came to him and said, making offerings is fine, but why don't you do some Dharma practice? And so the monk asked Dromtonpa, what do you mean? And he said, give up this life in your mind. Give up this life in your mind. So the sort of limited focus on just the affairs of this life is a problem. Just being totally concerned about the affairs of this life, and that includes being nice to people, like just being nice to people. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that sort of something just constrained to the day-to-day of this life and not trying to think beyond this life. So still, being compassionate, affectionate, just within the constraint of this life does have a beneficial result, but it's not taking the real opportunity of this particular human life, to actually somehow to think, how do we really take the essence of this life? How do we really take the essence of this life? So, and that's a question to really think about. And so let's do some meditation. So we do some meditation. We might think, I'm doing 5 minutes meditation, but the essence of meditation really is to try to be mindful of every moment. And one of the benefits of, let's say, like breathing meditation, is that we can develop this quality of mindfulness, which one way we can think about that is awareness of your mind. Awareness of your mind. So that part of that awareness is like an honest self-appraisal about your own thoughts and being able to identify, anger, to be able to identify mindfulness, to be able to identify pride, to be able to identify attachment in your mind. And then that enables you to do something about it. But without being aware, we get completely caught out by this escalation of anger, or this escalation of desire, or a pervasive arrogance towards others, or a superiority and competitiveness which never seems to abate. And the reason that it never abates is because we are not aware of it, and we are not applying any controls over that type of thinking. So the development of mindfulness is really critical. So let's just adopt a comfortable position, mainly having your back straight. Just become aware of your mind and gradually let all of the different thoughts in your mind, let them just sort of fade away. So don't put any mental focus or energy into the thoughts. And then bring your mind as much as you can down to a state of no thought, and then turn the attention to the breath. The breath coming in and going out, and just the awareness, like the mental awareness of the breath, some sort of mental image of the breath coming in and coming out, and make that your object of focus, and keep your focus 100% just on that. You can relax your concentration a little bit, but we can now do a short analytical meditation. So the topic here is to examine within yourself and just to check whether, your expressions of anger or miserliness, jealousy, strong desire, superiority, arrogance. You can pick, whatever might seem to be something that you engage in or that you suffer from, and just look at that emotion, that afflictive emotion in your life, and ask yourself. So you examine do I engage in that afflictive emotion? Do I engage in that afflictive emotion thinking that there is no consequence? So do I see a consequence from my anger or my attachment, my pride, my arrogance? What do I see for me in relation to all of those afflictive emotions? So you can sort of examine your own behaviour over the years, and then to think, do I think there's a consequence or not? So just to check. So then relax your concentration. So just so long as you don't feel bad about yourself, my answer to that is I've engaged in all of those behaviours and thought there was no consequence. I think the reality of certainly the reality of my behaviour is that I am not considering a consequence, So, and you can see from this whole topic that is an error, that is a fundamental error to think that there's no consequence. But I can see within my own mind, I do not see a consequence. I do not consider a consequence. Yeah, so we got some time for discussion or questions. Yeah.
Often in people that have depression, in counselling, they often want them to find their anger.
Yeah.
So
So the question is about, in counselling and that on like depression or something, is to instruct people to find their anger, Look, I think for somebody that's, unwell, especially with depression, you have to change the energy of that depression, so you have to lift the energy of the depression. And maybe, I'm not saying that it does or it doesn't, but maybe that engaging in emotion is something that can lift, give you energy that might lift the depression. So, because I think one aspect of depression, it's just my opinion. I'm not backing to this, but just that it's the dulling of everything, and that's not healthy. But so, sort of from Buddhist point of view, one of the lamas will talk about, when mental thinking starts to sort of spiral down into the trap of, let's say, the trap of depression or other mental illness, it can become extremely difficult to extract yourself back up out of that. But one of the antidotes that is proposed for depression, or self-deprecation, self-loathing, or pulling yourself down, is to contemplate the value of this human life. So to really, like I was saying before, to really recognize the value and the opportunity of this human life and the preciousness of this opportunity as a human. So to some degree that is presupposing a bit of a belief in past lives and future lives, as the basis for that. But even without that, even if you just think, there's all these living creatures in the world and I happen to be human, and whether that's God or somebody else or it's one life only or whatever it is, to actually really focus on the value of this human life and the preciousness of it, and that can help lift depression, because depression is thinking that life has no value, and that's not correct. To really focus on the preciousness of this life, So, but yeah, look, mental illness is difficult. So yeah, but anyway, I'm not sure if that helps, but. So, and for all of us, so one of the aspects of, we're talking about complacency. So complacency sort of, we have the 6 perfections, generosity, morality, patience, joyous effort, those first 4, then concentration, wisdom. So patience. And joyous effort. Joyous effort is the antidote to laziness. And one of the aspects of laziness is self-deprecation. Self-deprecation. Thinking, I can't meditate. There's no way. He's talking about becoming enlightened or I can't do that. That sort of, don't talk to me about practicing compassion for everybody. I'm not capable of that. These are all aspects of self-deprecation. And depression, I think, is also an aspect of self-deprecation. So the antidote to self-deprecation is like seeing the value of this human life, but joyful effort in Dharma practice is the main aspect. So, practicing kindness, thinking about others, thinking about the suffering of others and developing compassion for them are antidotes to self-deprecation. Because the self-deprecation is totally me. I am so miserable, I am so lowly, and that's an error. It's an incorrect thought. So to oppose that thought, we can think about the value of this human life. That how precious it is. How lucky am I? Like that sort of talking about winning $100 million in some lottery. That's nothing compared to this. Nothing. This is so valuable. So that thinking like that is a way to try to lift that self-deprecating mind. So the overcome self-deprecation, joyfully practice virtue, with a joyfulness, and always remembering the Dharma, like understanding cause and effect, is also very important. And I think I've forgotten one, but anyway, so. I'm waiting. Yeah, I can see you.
I understand what you're talking about when in moment of self-deprecation total focus on myself. But what about those moments of frustration and despair when you are trying, let's say, to make someone happy? Like you take care of your dearest and nearest, and at the same moment there is so much problem in your own mind. Like there is world outside and world inside, and there are so many difficulties in both aspects. And sometimes you think like, oh my goodness, so many years in a row I'm trying to tame my mind, I'm trying to be generous and genuinely care about others, etc. And still it seems like everything is falling apart. So in this particular moment, I cannot see myself as a selfish person, because as far as I see, I'm genuinely trying to help others and myself in a good way. But another year, another year, and I cannot see the progress. And I know that there is no other way that I need to continue, but sometimes there is no energy, and because it's not a monastic way of life, it's a way of life of lay person. There is no time for proper training, and it seems that without this proper training it's impossible to progress. So what is your advice still to continue in those moments of frustration?
I won't try to capture your whole question, but I would disagree that there is no opportunity for proper training. I'd really disagree with that. You don't have to be a monastic, you don't have to be ordained, you don't have to be walking around in coloured robes or anything. The opportunity to practice pervades every moment of your existence. The opportunity to practice. And thinking of, when you were asking that, I was thinking, okay, maybe one thing to try is, you're seeing all these difficulties for yourself. You're seeing all these, you're trying to make, your son, your other people happy, all these sort of things. You're trying to make people happy. And just, you see it as problematic. So when you were saying that, I was thinking, one possible antidote to that is to look at, this person here, some person in your life, close or not close, I don't think it matters, but rejoice in their well-being. Turn your mind to rejoice in their happiness, in their circumstance. To think about how fortunate they are, and to rejoice, have a sense of joy in their happiness. As a practice. And I think if you do that, all of those other problems will disappear. The actual active engaging in a joyful recognition of somebody else's happiness will make all of those other problems disappear. Substantially, they don't disappear. The physicality of the reality of your economic situation or your work situation or your thing, the reality of that does not disappear, but the rejoicing in this person's well-being and happiness and success, your mind will be absorbed in that, and the mental problems of everything else will disappear. All right. Now, then you have to decide whether that's worthwhile or not. And so the trick is to do it and then say it's worthwhile or it's not worthwhile, but to actually, rejoicing. So, it's done as one of the real causes of happiness for us is to rejoice in the success and the well-being of others. You drive down somewhere in Turak and you see all the beautiful houses and rejoice in the wealth of others, the beautiful circumstances, the success, the beauty. Find something to give you joy.
Wouldn't you think like a lot of those sort of things that you might celebrate in other people, like, oh wow, their success, they're often sort of like
miserable.
They're the most like blatant sort of manifestations of greed, which we're supposed to be, turning ourselves individually away from.
Well,
and I think like a huge ill of society is how much we reward greed.
Well, the question is about, the product. Absolutely. How do you become a billionaire? Is you don't give away your money. That's the only way. The only way you become a billionaire is to hold it here and not put it over there. Otherwise, there's probably a lot of people that have had incredible fortune in generating wealth, but they don't hold on to it. So you're sort of correct to say that the that super wealth or any wealth is because of the holding on to. Yeah, not our wealth, hey. Well, but it also applies to us. It applies to us as well that accumulation of any sort requires holding on to that accumulation. It's fundamental. You cannot become a billionaire unless you hold on to your money, because after, whatever, it's fundamental. The only way you can become really wealthy is actually to hold on to your wealth so that in the bank it goes up and up and up, Some are doing that. Some are giving their wealth away. But even then, anyway. But look, that's this. But the other thing you were saying in your question, cause and effect. We say that greed. Your argument is that greed is the cause of wealth. But not always, is it? So what about the greedy person who does not get wealthy? What's the problem there? Do they not have enough greed? Okay, so, and this is where the examination of cause and effect is absolutely essential because, the Buddha said, in talking about karma, from generosity comes wealth. From patience comes beauty. And the quote goes on. And so, for us to really understand that, merely having lots and lots of money in the bank, sort of from a cause and effect point of view, you would say that is due to past generosity of that person in a past life. But sometimes that person experiences a life of insufficient wealth in their mind. In their mind, they suffer from a state of mind of insufficiency of wealth. I've got $999 million, but I'm not a billionaire. I have to become a billionaire. That mind state. So you can say that despite all their wealth, they're still experiencing a poverty of experience. So it's not a given that a really wealthy person would feel wealthy. And it's not a given that an absolutely poor person feels poor. So, and this is the thing to understand about cause and effect, is, the mind, the experience of the mind is the actual person's experience. So the wealth, in a sense, is irrelevant. But the practice that I was sort of advising here is just on the mere appearances, to rejoice in the apparent happiness of others. Like, until you understand what's going in their mind, you don't actually know whether they are happy or not happy. But if you see somebody looking joyful, then you rejoice in that joyfulness, Two people talking, happily talking and enjoying each other's company, to rejoice in that happiness. But the reality is we don't know what their actual experience is. We don't know, to use one example, Elon Musk apparently eats baked beans on toast every day of the week or something. There's something that he does like that. He's not interested in the trappings, those trappings of wealth, Lives in a little house somewhere, he did for a long time. Well, anyway, but there is some truth in that. There's a sort of a complexity there. And, it's sort of like his wealth is, in a way, not the way we might think wealth would express itself. Same T-shirt, trousers every day, Like there's a bit of a badge of honour amongst all these tech billionaires that they just wear a T-shirt and a pair of jeans. So anyway, but the thing is, you don't want to get caught up in this sort of analysing of what something else. You can just merely say, whatever, But the answer to this thing is to rejoice in the success of others, or the happiness of others, the situation of others, as an antidote to being too caught up in your own issues, So, yeah. She was probably first because she's on my periphery. I'll go with you, yeah.
So what you're saying is like rejoicing in others, it's called Freud and Freud, I think is a word for it, and then there's Schadenfreude, which is the opposite, where you rejoice in people's suffering, which is kind of when you watch reality TV and so on.
Like maths, like you're watching maths, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so is that like, is giving into like, stuff like I know this is kind of like maybe a bit off topic, but like into the opposite of Freud and Freud, Schadenfreude, is that kind of like reducing your karma, or kind of like, or is it just like?
So the question, so the question is about like rejoicing in the, about rejoicing in the well-being or the happiness of others, or rejoicing in their misery, like their misfortune, or their, like all those videos you see in the internet of people slipping over or trying to do something, or their face goes in the cake, all these sort of things, endless, these endless sort of feeding the misfortunes of others and as entertainment. So this is the real challenge to us, is to check what's happening in my mind. Watching skaters skating along edge of things and then falling off and whacking their head on the concrete. Like all this endless stuff that you see,
And now it's all AI too, so you don't even know what's real. Anyway,
Yeah, well, that's right, AI. Yeah. But anyway, check in your own mind is the absolute determiner of what to do. Okay, so thank you everyone. We'll just do a very brief, everybody coming together, thinking, meditating, listening, asking questions, it is very rare, very, very rare. And so think of that as something very precious and let it take like a ball of white light in the centre of the room, everybody's contribution, and then bring it above the crown of your own head and just let it pour right into you, completely granting you the benefit of tonight, like the benefit, and it fills your body with light and your mind very clear and open with let's say like with the determination to become more mindful and a determination to identify the afflictive emotions within yourself and to overcome them. And then imagine that you give that benefit away to every living being, and to imagine rays of light radiating out from every pore of your body, radiating out to all other living beings and sharing this benefit with them. And then imagine the light rays dissolve back into you, and just feeling a very clear, open mind and a joyfulness. Completely free of all of your ordinary issues. All right, so thank you all very much. I've got next week to go, and so hopefully see you all next week. Anzac. Oh, for me it's a holiday because my EBA agreement gives it to me as a holiday, so that's good. So next Monday. So see you then. All right, thank you.